This is Project Cars, and this is a video about working your way up the leaderboard. The leaderboard in Project Cars represents times that people have recorded in time trial. The time trial option is here on the main screen, and in the time trial you pick a certain track, a certain car. You can add ghosts, there'll be more about that later, and then you drive. In the time trial, you have 5 liters of fuel. It never goes down. The track is warm. Your tires start at ideal temperature, and you still can turn on and off whatever assists you want. You can have manual gearing or not, but the things that are fixed are your fuel and the track temperature and your tires start. Perfect. So let's say you have a car and a track that you want to get on the leaderboard, work your way up the leaderboard. What you might want to do is first go into free practice, pick the track and the car, and go out and turn on the driving line and drive the track, see if you like it, see if it's one that you want to focus on leaderboard. And what I want to mention here is, and I will go back to this several times, is the setups that are used for the cars. When you go into free practice, but not when you go into time trial, you have the ability from the start screen of the practice to edit the tuning setup. And you can go through and change your tire pressures and your ride heights and your fuel load and everything else. And if you try to exit this screen after changing something, it'll say, well, you're going to lose all your changes. Do you want to save it? And so you go back and you save it. What you have done is you have saved the one setup slot that you have for that car at that track. If you go and drive that car at that track now in a time trial or in a quick race, you are going to use that modified setup. This is the weird thing about Project Cars, is you have one slot for saving a setup for a given car on a given track. And so if you have edited your setup in free practice and you saved it, which you probably did, because if you didn't save it, then you didn't actually use it, then when you go to time trial, you will be using that setup. The way you can kind of tell whether or not you've ever edited a setup is you go to My Garage, you pick the car. In this case, I already have the Formula Rookie picked, but let me just pick a different car. I'm going to go to a Alpine A450. Select this. Whoops, do that again. Okay, notice now that I have these options. Create new setup. That's it. No setup loaded. No, I can't load setup. I have nothing for this car except I can create a new setup. However, if I go in there and I select the Formula Rookie, you will see that I have create new setup, edit current setup, and load setup. Now, because the last thing I did was Silverstone, then the current setup is Silverstone, but there is no way to tell that from this screen. You can see up in the upper right corner that it says I'm editing Formula Rookie, so at least that's good, but there's no way to tell that this setup came from Silverstone. And then you go to load setup, and it will show you which ones you have modified from the original default and saved. So I've messed with the Formula Rookie setup in some way. It could be as minor as changing the fuel load or changing everything on these 4 tracks, and that's it. So if I did want to change the Silverstone setup, just to be sure, I would go in and say load Silverstone. I would edit the setup. I would make whatever changes I wanted to make. And when I click save, it's going to say, do you want to save this setup for all tracks? Will this be like your new default for Formula Rookie, which you might want to do? I haven't been, because I just specifically am working on a certain thing. So then you click over here, you use whatever button on your controller. And mind you, all of this stuff I'm showing is for the PC version. It might be different on a console. But now I go down to Silverstone International. It says, yes, it shows this little thing to warn me I have an existing setup. But if I click this, now it says I'm going to save a new one. So if I then save it, which I haven't edited, but it'll say, are you sure you want to override it for the selected tracks? In this case, I only have one. And I say yes. So that now is my setup, and that's what I'm going to use if I go and drive Formula Rookie at Silverstone in time trial or free practice or quick race. That's the setup it's going to use. So we don't even have to worry about setups when we're just learning a track, or even when we're way onto the leaderboard. You know, setups is the thing to buy you that last couple of seconds maybe when you're trying to get up farther on the leaderboard. But it's so confusing that I wanted to go over that. So you could go to free practice, drive around the track with the driving line on, learn it, see how you're doing. Then that you will not show up on the leaderboard at that point. Then you can go to time trial and now do your best and try to work your way up the leaderboard. But what if you don't feel like you know the track well enough? You're not sure what gears to use through certain corners. You're not sure where the track limits are, which curbs you can cut safely. There's something you can do. What you could do is go do a quick race at the track that you're going to work on in the car you're going to use, and set it up so you have some number of opponents. You don't need that many. I set it to 5. Set it to a relatively low number of laps, but you wanted enough laps that the tires get warm. And you want to start at the last spot on the grid so that you're not in the way of the AI cars. You want all of the opponents to use the identical car so that you're studying how the AI drives this car. Mind you, the AI is not necessarily something you want to learn every nuance from, partially because they can have setups that are impossible, like 0 ride height, and also because they don't necessarily drive well. But when you turn the opponent skill, the AI, up to 100, they're going to get some pretty good times. They're not going to be world record leaderboard times, but they're going to be within a few seconds probably. And when you're first learning, you can learn from that. So I now set up this race for 5 laps with 5 opponents. And you know what, though? I don't even really care about any of that, because when I get into the race, and let's wait for it to start here. We're on the starting grid. This is me. I'm gonna go when it tells me to go, just for fun. But here's what I'm gonna do. Right away, I'm gonna hit escape. I'm gonna retire to the pit box. Now I'm out of the race. But notice I have a spectate option. I click on spectate. This is me. I'm sitting in the pit box, so I'm not very fun to spectate. I'm going to move up and I'm going to watch the number 1 car. And I have choices for the camera, but unfortunately not the cockpit. This is another frustrating thing about project cars. Whoops, I was going to do they just changed who was number 1. So I've got a chase cam, a TV cam, a nose cam, and eventually, yeah, that's it actually. So I'm not sure which one. Maybe this one, the chase cam, is best for watching how they approach the corners. But more importantly, I can click on this little arrow thing here, and I can turn on the telemetry. So now I can see what gear this AI driver is in, the speed that he's carrying through the corners. I can see his throttle pedal and his brake pedal. And so I can just sit here and watch this race, and I can see, for instance, he just got a 1:18.25 on his first lap, which is not a good time for this track, but that was from a standing start. And so, and you can flip through the other cars and see, so the other times, so you can see that these other guys are getting 1:18s, 1:19s. And if we sat here and let him finish this lap, we'll see what his time is, and you can see if that's a time that you feel like you could learn, like you could aspire to get that time. And even though you may not copy the AI driver exactly, you maybe learned about where he shifted, what gear he shifted into. And this is one reason to use a default setup at this point, is that you're probably similar gearing, at least, if nothing else, to the AI car. Now, mind you, I could have gone ahead and done the race and saved a replay at the end, and then gone into my profile, and so here he just got a 1:11.37 on his first flying lap. He's carrying a lot of fuel, so that's not a bad time compared to leaderboard times where you're only carrying 5 liters. I don't know that there's any way to tell the AI to carry less fuel. I mean, I only have a 5-lap race. You'd think it'd be smart enough to carry less fuel, but I'm not sure if there's a way to make sure that happens. So anyway, I could have done the race, saved the leaderboard, or saved the replay, but the problem is then when I bring up the replay by going to my profile, my gamer profile in the main menu, and I go to the media or saved highlights, I think it is, I can bring up that replay. I still can't watch the AI cars from the cockpit view. I can only watch myself from the cockpit view, but I can't turn on the telemetry. So it teaches me nothing compared to just spectating the race as it happens. So this is a great way, I think, to kind of really start to figure out what you need to do on a track to work your way up from brand new to farther up the leaderboard. So let's go ahead and get out of this race, which I didn't do well in because I was retired to the pits. Here you can see that I could save the replay. In fact, I will do that. It's not going to do me any good, but I save the replay. Now I return to Race Central, and I go to Driver Network. My profile, and I go to Highlights, and I now have Formula Rookie at Silverstone International saved as a replay, and I can view it. Which, if you're studying your own driving, maybe you do want to save the replay, because in your own car you can be in the cockpit like this. Unfortunately, for learning from the AI, if you use these arrows here, if you go to an AI car, you can't be in the cockpit, and there is no way to turn on telemetry. So it really doesn't help compared to having just watched it, spectating it during the race. So that's that. Now, I said you might not want to learn just from the AI because it does some impossible stuff and it drives a little weird. So in that case, how do you learn from real-world drivers? Well, you can't load replays in Project Cars 1 from real-world drivers. You can't load setups from real-world drivers in Project Cars 1. So all that stuff I said about tuning your car, you're just going to have to find setups on YouTube or whatever. But what you can do is ghosts. So there's 3 slots for ghosts, and you just click on Add. You go to Vehicle Specific Records. you can see that the top time for Formula Rookie at this track is a 108.955, and I can click on this, and now I've added it as a ghost. You might not want to start with the top times, because if you're just learning, they'll just take off. You'll be left behind. You won't be able to learn anything from them. So just pick times that are a little bit faster than what you are, a few seconds faster maybe, to really push yourself. And you can add up to 3 ghosts. Now, here's another problem with Project Cars 1. You can't tell by looking at these cars on the leaderboard or here in the ghost selection screen whether they used any assists or what assists they used, and whether they used a custom setup or a default setup. And if they did use a custom setup, you can't load it. So I can't help you with getting their setups, but what I can tell you is that I will put a link down in the description to the Steam PC leaderboard information. And so I am using the PC version through Steam. And so when I go to that website that I will link down below, it shows me these same cars on that leaderboard with the ability. It tells me whether or not they used a custom or default setup, and it lets me hover over the last icon on there. Will tell me what assists they have turned on. Everything from just having a driving line on to automatic clutch to whatever. And so then I can figure out what I'm up against. And if, for instance, I only want to worry about cars with default setup, then I can look on there and figure out which ones those are. And with that, I'm pretty much done, because I don't think there's much reason to show me actually doing this, because I have spent a lot of time on this track, and I may have reached my pinnacle of how far up the leaderboard I can get. But you know, especially when I start on a new track that I really don't know, all those things I showed about approaching it, I think will help me. And then you eventually will get to the point that you're putting the top ghosts on your time trial. I just invalidated my lap trying to cut that corner. But you know, you've got no room for error when you're trying to go for the top guys, which these 3 ghosts are the top 3 in the world. So anyway, so that's that.